First, you hear the sirens. It's a familiar sound, a distant wail that cuts through the noise of the city, a signal that something is wrong somewhere else. But then, the sound gets closer, louder, more urgent. It screams past your window, a blur of red and blue lights painting the street in frantic strokes. You might feel a brief moment of curiosity, a fleeting thought for whoever is at the center of that chaos. Then, a new sound shatters the night. It's not the siren's cry or the roar of an engine. It is the sharp, unmistakable crack of gunfire. The chase has just ended, and a life, or multiple lives, may have just been irrevocably altered. This sudden, violent end to a police pursuit is a scenario that plays out too often on our nation's roads. It transforms a traffic stop or a suspected crime into a life-or-death confrontation. The flashing lights and screaming sirens are just the beginning of a story that can escalate with terrifying speed. We see the aftermath on the news, the yellow tape, the somber faces of investigators, but the critical questions often remain unanswered for the public. What happens in those moments between the initial pursuit and the final tragic shots? We need to understand the chain of events that leads from a moving vehicle to a drawn weapon, a journey filled with high-stakes decisions. This essay will explore that very question. How does a police chase, an event that starts on wheels, end in gunfire? A police pursuit rarely begins with the expectation of violence. More often, it starts with something routine. Something that happens thousands of times a day. It could be a simple traffic violation, running a red light speeding through a residential neighborhood. An officer flips on their lights, expecting a standard stop, a brief interaction to issue a ticket or warning, but the driver makes a fateful choice. They accelerate. A routine stop becomes a police chase. The stakes skyrocket. Other times, the spark is a more serious crime. A vehicle might be reported stolen, or it matches a suspect car used in a recent robbery, robberies, burglaries, even a violent assault. The goal: stop the vehicle and investigate the suspected felony. The driver may be desperate to avoid capture, fearing a long prison sentence. Fleeing isn't about a ticket, it's about evading accountability. Desperation leads to extreme, risky choices. Sometimes the reason is fear, confusion, or a simple mistake. An outstanding warrant can cause panic at the sight of lights, or driving with a suspended license, or without insurance. Other times, the driver is under the influence of drugs or alcohol. They react instinctively, not thinking about the danger they create. Once a pursuit begins, the potential for violence escalates with every block and every turn. The primary factor is speed. A chase that starts at 45 miles per hour can quickly surge to over 100 miles per hour, even on city streets not designed for that. As the speed increases, so does the danger. The fleeing driver may begin to weave recklessly through traffic, run stop signs, drive into oncoming lanes. Each of these actions endangers the suspect, endangers the officers, endangers other drivers, endangers pedestrians, endangers residents. The vehicle itself transforms from a mode of transportation into a multi-ton, unguided missile. The behavior of the suspect is a critical driver of escalation. A driver who is merely trying to outrun the police is dangerous enough, but one who actively tries to harm officers or the public presents a much more immediate threat. For instance, a suspect might swerve aggressively toward police cruisers in an attempt to ram them off the road. They might intentionally drive onto crowded sidewalks or aim their vehicle at people standing at a bus stop. These are not just acts of evasion. They are acts of assault with a deadly weapon. Such behavior forces officers to reevaluate the situation in real time and consider more forceful tactics to end the threat. Departmental policies often dictate when a pursuit should be continued and when it should be terminated. Officers must constantly weigh the need to apprehend the suspect against the danger the chase poses to the public. If a chase for a minor traffic violation enters a crowded school zone during dismissal time, the responsible choice is often to call it off. However, if the suspect is wanted for a violent felony and is actively endangering lives, the decision to continue the pursuit becomes more justifiable, even as the risks mount. While the chase unfolds on the streets, a critical and often overlooked role is played by the police dispatcher. This individual is the central nervous system of the entire operation, a calm voice in a storm of chaos. From a desk filled with screens and radios, the dispatcher coordinates every aspect of the pursuit. Their first job is to clearly and accurately relay information from the pursuing officer to every other officer in the area. They announce the vehicle's description, its location, its direction of travel, the reason for the initial stop. This information is vital for setting up a perimeter and getting additional resources to the scene safely. The dispatcher is also a gatekeeper of information and a key strategic partner. This context is crucial. It can change the entire complexion of the chase. They are the unseen link in the chain, and their performance can mean the difference between a safe resolution and a catastrophic failure. Every police chase reaches a crossroads, a point where critical decisions must be made in a fraction of a second. For the fleeing driver, this moment is often a final chance to de-escalate. They can choose to pull over, surrender, face the consequences of their actions. This choice ends the immediate danger to themselves, the police, the public. However, fueled by panic intoxication, a desperate fear of arrest, many drivers push past this off-ramp. Instead, they double down on their escape attempt. Section 6. The moment of truth, when force becomes necessary. The chase often ends when the fleeing vehicle can go no further. It crashes, is boxed in by police cruisers, or is disabled by spike strips. This is the moment of truth, a tense and volatile standoff. Officers will typically exit their vehicles, draw their weapons, take cover behind their car doors, and begin issuing loud, clear commands. Show me your hands! Get out of the car slowly! Do not move! The trigger for using force often comes from the suspect's refusal to comply, or worse, from an action that officers perceive as a direct threat. If a suspect remains in the car and is seen reaching for something under the seat or in the center console, officers must assume the worst, that they are reaching for a weapon. The same is true if a suspect suddenly opens their car door and emerges with an object in their hand. In the chaos and high-stakes tension of the moment, an officer has only a split second to decide if that object is a gun, a knife, or something harmless like a cell phone. Another common trigger is when the suspect attempts to use their vehicle as a weapon. Even after being stopped, a desperate driver might throw the car into reverse and ram a police cruiser, or accelerate forward toward an officer who is on foot. In these instances, the vehicle itself is considered a deadly weapon, capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. An officer who is in the path of that vehicle, or who sees another officer in its path, may be legally justified in using deadly force to stop the threat. The decision isn't about stopping the car. It's about stopping the driver from using it to kill someone. Ultimately, the decision to fire a weapon is a last resort, made when an officer reasonably believes that their life, or the life of another person, is in imminent danger. It is the tragic culmination of the entire event, from the initial failure to pull over to the final, desperate act of defiance or aggression. The sirens have faded. The chase is over. Section 7. The rules of engagement. Law policy protection. The use of force by police, especially deadly force, is not arbitrary. It is governed by a framework of laws, court decisions, departmental policies designed to protect both the public and the officers themselves. The legal foundation is often traced back to a Supreme Court case, Tennessee versus Garner, which established that using deadly force to stop a fleeing suspect is unconstitutional unless the officer has probable cause to believe the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer or others. This means an officer cannot shoot a fleeing suspect simply to prevent their escape. There must be a clear and immediate danger. Building on this legal standard, individual police departments create their own specific use of force policies. These policies provide officers with more detailed guidance on what to do in a crisis. They often outline a use of force continuum, which suggests that officers should use the lowest level of force necessary to control a situation. Verbal commands, physical controls, taser, pepper spray, deadly force. During a high-risk stop after a chase, officers are trained to follow these steps, but a suspect's sudden threatening actions can force them to bypass the lower levels and respond immediately with deadly force to a perceived deadly threat. Officer safety is a cornerstone of these rules. Police are trained to approach every situation with a tactical mindset, especially one as dangerous as the end of a pursuit. Vehicles for cover draw their weapons, shout commands from a distance. These actions are not intended to be aggressive. They are defensive measures designed to protect themselves from a suspect who has already proven they are willing to take dangerous risks to avoid capture. The training emphasizes creating distance and time. Distance to stay safe from a potential attack, and time to assess the situation and make a better decision. However, these rules and training can be incredibly difficult to apply perfectly in a chaotic, fast-moving, and terrifying environment. Adrenaline, fear, incomplete information can cloud judgment. An officer must make a life or death decision in a split second, based on what they perceive in that moment. Section 8. A tale of two chases. Lessons from the street. Consider a real though anonymized example. A chase began after officers spotted a car linked to a series of armed robberies. The pursuit was fast and dangerous, weaving through late-night city streets. The driver, desperate to escape a long prison sentence, refused to stop. On the radio, the dispatcher calmly relayed that the suspect was considered armed and dangerous. A supervisor, hearing the escalating risk, authorized officers to use a tactical maneuver. Officers executed a maneuver to spin the car out. The maneuver worked, and the car slammed into a guardrail. Officers surrounded the vehicle, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The suspect, instead of surrendering, emerged from the car holding a dark object and pointed it at them. Multiple officers fired, ending the threat. The object was later found to be a handgun. In this case, the chase, though dangerous, led to the capture of a violent felon, and the use of force was deemed justified because of the direct threat. Now, consider a different scenario with a different outcome. A pursuit started over a minor traffic infraction. A teenager was drifting in an empty parking lot. When an officer approached, the teen panicked and sped away. The chase quickly escalated to high speeds through a quiet suburban neighborhood. The supervising sergeant, listening to the radio, weighed the minor nature of the initial offense against the growing danger to the community. He made a difficult call: terminate the pursuit. The officers were frustrated, but they complied, turning off their lights and sirens. The next day, using the car's license plate number, they went to the teen's home and arrested him. He was scared but unharmed. The community was safe. This chase ended without violence because policy and supervision worked exactly as intended. These two stories illustrate the critical variables at play. In the first case, the severity of the crime and the suspect's direct actions created a situation where deadly force became a tragic necessity. The suspect's choices drove the escalation from start to finish. In the second case, the minor nature of the crime allowed for a different option. The supervisor's decision to prioritize public safety over an immediate arrest prevented a potentially deadly crash or confrontation. It demonstrates the immense value of de-escalation and highlights the importance of having and following a restrictive pursuit policy that gives supervisors the authority to call off a dangerous chase. The lessons from these streets are clear. The suspect's behavior is the single most important factor in determining the outcome. A decision to surrender almost always ends the situation peacefully, but the actions of the police are also crucial. Strong supervision, a commitment to de-escalation, adherence to policies that weigh risks carefully, can prevent a chase from spiraling into violence. Section 9. After the echo fades, finding a safer path forward. When the sirens fade and the final echo of a gunshot dissipates, the scene is left with profound and often tragic consequences. A family may have lost a loved one. An officer may have to live with the decision to take a life. A community is left to grapple with the violence on its streets. To find a safer path forward, we must look at the clear, hard-earned lessons. The first and most vital lesson is for the public: never flee from the police. The act of running, no matter the reason, instantly turns a routine interaction into a life-threatening situation. Complying with an officer's commands is the surest way to ensure everyone goes home safe. For law enforcement, the lessons are about control, restraint, wisdom. The decision to initiate and continue a pursuit is one of the most serious responsibilities an officer has. Departments are adopting more restrictive pursuit policies, limiting high-speed chases to violent felonies. This is a crucial step. GPS trackers, drones, helicopter support can be used to monitor a suspect from a distance and reduce dangerous ground pursuits. The goal is to apprehend with the least risk to the community, even if it means letting a suspect go short-term to catch them safely later. Training in de-escalation and communication is not just a buzzword. It is a lifeline. The moments after a chase ends are incredibly tense. Use time, use distance, communicate clearly and calmly, read a suspect's behavior. These can create chances for a peaceful surrender. Equip officers with the skills to slow a situation down, even when adrenaline tells them to speed up. This mental fortitude is as important as firearm proficiency, and it can save lives on both sides of the badge. Reducing chases that end in gunfire requires a commitment from everyone. Drivers must make the responsible choice to pull over. Police departments must enforce safety-focused pursuit policies and invest in training and technology that provide alternatives. Communities must have honest conversations about balancing catching criminals and protecting the public. There are no easy answers, but understanding what happens when sirens turn to shots lets us work together to make that sound rarer on our streets.